In this tutorial, we're going to be talking about layers, and layers are the cream of the crop with Photoshop and what probably makes it the most powerful image editing software that I've ever used. You pretty much can't get anything done without layers. It's extremely important that you know them. It's extremely important that you learn how to work with them, and it's also extremely important that whatever you do, if you make a new change, you put everything on a separate layer. Now, to get started with this, I will go ahead and open a few documents here. We'll scroll down and we'll pick, let's see, we'll go for rice. I got an image of rice here. Don't ask me why it's an image of rice, but it is. And then that creates its own layer over here with a small thumbnail. And to change this, I believe you can change the thumbnail. If you right click here in the open, you can give it no thumbnails, small thumbnails, which is default, medium, or large. I normally work on them with the small. It seems to work great for me. I can always kind of tell what I'm looking for. Then we'll add it. We'll go ahead and we'll add another one. And we'll add something to put on top of that. And we will go with something like this. Now this is a texture I downloaded from deviantart.com. It's a great site. You can get all kinds of things from there. And it's all free. So now they're open on two separate tabs. And what I'll do is to make both of these pictures go to the same tab on different layers, I'll make sure I'm on my move tool. I'll go over to this the paper texture here, and I'll just grab it and drag it right on over to this tab, and it switches over automatically, and I'll just drop it on here. Okay, now this isn't big enough to cover everything here that I want, so I'm going to hit Control T, and that'll bring it into the transform tool. And then I'll go ahead and position this off to the right. I'll grab this little handle over here and pull it off until it stretches all the way to the end. When I'm done, I'll confirm my modification by clicking the little checkmark box. And there we have it. Now you don't see the rice anymore because this paper texture is covering it up because it's on top of it. Now if I were to click the eyeball here, it would hide it but not delete it, and I can bring it right back. Now now it's its own layer. If I switch to say the brush tool, I can color all over this thing, and it stays on this layer. If I hide it again, you'll see that that brush stroke didn't go back here. Now when I click here, you obviously see that you cannot be used brush tool because the target layer is hidden. Well, that's because I have it hidden, I have it targeted. So if I bring it back, you can start the color again. So I'll go ahead and Control Z and get out of that again. Now another thing you may notice that is with the default picture, you have this little lock here. To get rid of that lock, it's very, very simple. All you have to do is just double click and then hit OK. You can change these at your will, but generally you just want to leave them the same, then hit OK. So it gets rid of the lock and makes this layer editable. So we'll go ahead and bring this back. Now what you can do with layers is just amazing. I can get my eraser tool out by pressing E. And I can expand the brush size here by pressing the brackets. And I mean, I could get rid of that. And look what happens. Once I delete this part, it reveals what's below. Control to get back. Now, you can stack as many layers on as you want. Many artists use tons and tons of layers when they're working. Like I said, every change you do is going to be on a separate layer. I need you to drill that into your head because you need to get on a separate layer. It will save you a lot of time and a lot of problems. So if you edit a layer and you won't be able to go back, if I were to brush on here and mess with this layer and say for some reason I couldn't Control Z it, well, now I've ruined my layer. And we don't want that, so a better way would be to create a new layer by clicking the little fold down here and then doing a brush stroke on top of that. So now if I hide the brush stroke, that goes away and I can bring it back. Also, if I click on the move tool, I can actually move this layer around. Okay, so now to delete this, well, we don't need this layer anymore. So to delete it, we have two options. We can click on the little trash can down here, or what I normally do is just drag this layer straight into the trash can. Now, we can also create layer groups. If you click on the little folder down here, this puts these into a group. And if I hold down Control, you can take these and drag them into that little group, and now they're in that folder, which you can expand and collapse. So that'll keep you a little bit more organized when you're working. Also, another thing that we can do is I can also kill this group by just dragging it down there. and we need to layer our layers. Get in the habit of naming, I'm sorry, layer your layer. Get in the habit of naming your layers because this is very important. It's going to also save you a lot of time and a lot of frustration. So if you just double click on its name there, you can rename this to rice, and I can rename this to texture. So get used to layers, play with layers a lot, and like I said, put everything new on its own layer. It's going to save you so much trouble, and make sure you stay organized. Now the second thing we're going to be talking about is layer modes. Now layer modes are this little drop down tab up here. Now you have all these different options, and all these different options do different things to this layer. And depending on this, what you choose here, it depends on how it interacts with the layer below it. For example, if I click multiply, well, what it does here is it knocks out all the white that it sees in this texture, in our texture layer. It knocks out all the white but leaves all the black. So it adds this really cool, like, vintage look to our rice. And that is the same thing with any one of the little different layer modes that we choose. And some of them don't look as good as others, and some of them you can get really cool effects from. So if you come on here and click that and just start pressing the down arrow key, you can actually scroll through and kind of get a feel for each one of the modes and what it does. So I'll just scroll through the end here, and so you'll see some of them are pretty horrid and they're not going to work for our needs or anything like that, but some of them are also pretty cool. So play with these, play with your layers. If you want something to look different, play with these layer modes and you can achieve some of the craziest awesome things ever. So and right next to here we have the opacity. If you're not familiar with opacity, it's how transparent this layer can be. So I can either grab this and move it left and right, or I can click on the actual name and move it left and right, and as you can see, it lowers the transparency, and so you can see the layer below it. So that's basically what you need to know about layers, and you'll see me work with a lot of layers as we move on in the tutorials, but that's the real basic premise of layers. Going over these a little bit here, to lock a layer, you click on the little lock, and now if I try to make a brush stroke on it, it says I can't because it's locked. And you can just uncheck it like this. These three you probably won't be using all that often, so we won't really be talking about that. Lock transparent pixels becomes very useful later on, but like I said, it's more an advanced technique. It's not what we're going to have to cover in this tutorial. So yeah, keep in mind the fill is kind of the same as the opacity, but we'll talk about that a little later, I'm sure. If you want to go for a transparent effect, always use the opacity instead of fill unless you know what you're doing. So that's layers, that's layer modes, and we'll move on to the next video, and hopefully you'll catch a good. We'll move on to the next video, and I hope you understood a little bit about this. And like I said, sit there and play with it and have fun with it, and or just follow along with the tutorials as we go through, and you'll get a real good hang of all this. So we'll see you in the next video.